Our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest personal injury law firm, lets you find out how much your case might be worth in just a couple of minutes on their app or website. You need a big law firm to fight a big company. Their fee is free unless you win, and you can start your claim with just one click at Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com/Pacman. The link is in the description. Welcome, everybody. Hope you had a good holiday. If you had one, we continue into night 2 of Hanukkah tonight. Very exciting. This interim period between Christmas and New Year's, it always feels sort of like a school half day, except we're doing the full show. You will be pleased to know. The Elon Trump stuff continues, and it now is rising to the level of international concern, and many are now extraordinarily disturbed over an exchange that took place between President-elect Elon Musk with no Trump present and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. And it's all joking and tongue-in-cheek and fun and games, and everybody's having a grand old time. But the suggestion here in the video I'm about to play from Elon Musk that he can't officially be the president because, of course, he's a naturalized citizen like yours truly, is another one of these allusions to the fact that it indeed seems to be Elon Musk who is in charge of much of what is going on behind the scenes. Let's take a listen to this video and then we will discuss.
So if you were, well, you can't be president of the U.S. last time I checked, right? But assume you are.
Not officially.
Not officially. Okay, so you're the unofficial president.
Elon, isn't that? Elon can't officially be president of the United States. But what about unofficial? Now, in a completely isolated world, if it was Elon Musk speaking to the Israeli prime minister, if it was, fill in the blanks, right? Vivek Ramaswamy, if it was Hannity, or if a right-wing figure is on a one-off speaking to a foreign leader, and it's known that this individual has a back channel to Trump, and a joke like this is told, all right, it's really not a big deal. But that's not the environment in which this is taking place. This is taking place in an environment where Elon Musk is increasingly in the position of being one of the very unelected bureaucrats that Trump campaigned on pushing out of positions of power. Nobody electing Elon, despite increasingly hearing from Republicans that when people elected Trump, they voted for whatever the hell it is that Donald Trump does, which is, of course, a very silly argument to make. This is happening in an environment where Donald Trump has already started to get a little irritated by this whole game, speaking recently at Turning Point USA, as we talked about on the Monday show, and saying, no, people are saying I'm ceding power to Elon. I'm not. He can't be president. He wasn't born in the United States. It's starting to get into Trump's psyche. And one of the things Trump really doesn't like is being upstaged or apparently overpowered by someone else. So there's this whole environment here. And then Trump goes to France and Elon Musk is there. Trump is at Mar-a-Lago having high-level meetings with people that, whether we like them or not, are sort of at the center of power right now. And Elon Musk is there. And recently, Trump's at Mar-a-Lago playing YMCA on his iPad for people in the dining room while they have the terrible overdone steaks and the crappy Caesar salads. And Elon is talking to MAGA Mike Johnson and whoever else in the Senate about policy and about shutdowns and about funding and what it is that they want. So in a complete vacuum, we would say, oh, okay, he sat down with Netanyahu, they made a joke, who cares? But it is not a complete vacuum. It is, in fact, a very different situation. And this has, as I told you about earlier this week, this has every sign of ending very, very poorly. We will keep an eye on it, of course, into the new year. I have some unbelievable video to play for you. And I have to tell you, I'm pretty damn proud of what I'm about to play for you. Lone liberal Luke the Bee's Knees Beasley, who started going to Trump rallies for us now, I guess years ago, right? How long has it been? Luke Beasley appeared on the Timcast Earl, that's IRL, the Timcast Earl show, and he decimated 5 Megapotamians who brought the usual specious arguments out. This is real. You know, when I saw Luke in DC last week, he told me he was going to be doing this, and he seemed very well prepared. You know, one of the great things about going to the White House last week was not only did I get to see Luke and the Dollemores and others, I also met folks like Dean Withers, for example, who I think are just doing such a great job in these confrontational debates. And I said to Dean, and I said to Luke, I don't know if it's that I'm just too old for this crap, but I am too tired to go through the prep that's required to really seriously be prepared for these sorts of situations. They threw everything at Luke. And I'm going to play for you. It's like a media literacy clinic, really. I'm going to play for you some of what I think are the key moments. This was 2.5 hours long, if you can believe that. Anyway, let's not even weigh in on that. But let's dive into it. A couple of different clips here. And one of the things that, well, let me play it first, and then I'll explain what's interesting about this.
It says from Antifa.
Again, tell me. I think you have a great explanation.
I certainly do. I'm wondering, as you've made an argument, if you know what you're talking about.
How does that connect to my argument?
Do you know the difference between various ideologies among the right and the left? You've not been able to define it.
I actually know. I would say I'm not a master in the distinguishment between different ideologies within a side.
Then how can you claim the right is more violent?
Oh, how can you claim the left is more violent?
Because I know many of
From
these
your
different
feelings
factions
and your observations.
from my field reporting expertise and the reading of the research.
Well, then what research?
So if we distinguish, say, anarcho-libertarian, anarcho-communism, anarcho-syndicalism, we can talk about tankies, we can talk about social liberals, we can talk about traditional liberals. Now,
what Tim Pool is doing here is totally logically fallacious. It's fallacious, I should say. Oh boy. What? It's the day after. Okay. One of the things Tim Pool is doing here is he is trying to argue that if Luke can't define terms that Tim has arbitrarily put forward, Luke can't possibly evaluate data that shows that there is far more right-wing political violence in the United States than left-wing political violence. Now, these are two unrelated things. The thing that Tim asked Luke to define was, what's the difference between left-wing collectivism and right-wing collectivism? Luke said, I don't know. I mean, I can't define that, but that's a separate issue from crime. And of course, there is a relatively simple answer to the difference between left and right-wing collectivism, which is that right-wing collectivism is often based in national identity, racial identity, etc., whereas left-wing collectivism is more often based along class lines. That's what I would have said, but it doesn't matter because we know that when you look at politically motivated violence in the United States, the vast majority of it is right-wing. I would even argue, because they they love to pull this game where they say any radical Islamist-based violence is left-wing. Even if you give them that, most of the political violence is still right-wing. But I think if you look at the teachings of radical Islam, how can you argue that that's left-wing? There's nothing left-wing there. You do have the occasional eco-terrorist, which I think could accurately be branded as left-wing. And we don't want to fall into like a no true Scotsman thing where by definition, anyone who commits violence can't be left-wing. No, that's not true. You've got some eco-terrorism occasionally in the United States that we could say that's left-wing. But certainly the white nationalist violence and all of that stuff is overtly right-wing. And I would argue when you are committing violence in the name of a radical literal interpretation of religious doctrine, which you believe should govern civil government, which is what a radical interpretation of Islam would say, that seems fundamentally right-wing and authoritarian and fascistic. So anyway, the game that Tim Pool likes to play is saying, define these terms. And then when the person can't, you go, oh, well, you couldn't possibly just look at the data about crime. When, of course, You could. These are two completely different things. All right, we move ahead just briefly in this discussion, and this sort of thing just continues.
Read a press release from the University of Maryland. I'm asking you to define which groups.
I dug, and I could not find any research, even that came from a right-wing institution, that gave
which right-wing institution?
I'm saying I couldn't find one.
I agree. You can't find a right-wing institution that tracks.
Oh, there are right-wing institutions that do studies and stuff.
They don't track this.
Sure, so maybe because they're studies. Do you see what's happening though? I think
you haven't done the research, and so you're saying
apparently you haven't even less than me. Sheesh.
I have 20 years of field reporting on the ground,
and every single time you come back to
give me substance, bro.
That's what I'm asking you. I'm saying I don't get caught up, especially let me give you another example. Crime has been going down. I could go find instances of crimes taking place, right?
The FBI lied about that. The FBI lied about that. That crime is not going down. And they actually altered and admitted those statements. Crime didn't go down. It's not even an argument. It actually went up.
You do know the FBI revised the
for
crime
2022, not 2023 and 2024.
Right.
We're seeing a really good trend on that front.
Do you know why? In
2022, it was not a huge revision.
Do you know why homicide is down?
Tell me.
I'm asking you not.
Anyway, so he plays these games where he wants to set the terms. Answer this question, answer that question. And of course, this isn't really how we figure things out and get to reality. And I'll admit, this is a very tough situation to be in for Luke. And he handled it as well as... Also, he's around multiple of these people. And Luke is the newest to this of any of these folks and really holding his own. Let's go to another moment from this discussion where Tim Pool starts to get angry. He doesn't like how Luke is handling this, and Tim starts to get very angry.
Specifically cited his speech. My dude, you don't know what you're talking about. And it's fine. I get it. We try to be polite. We try to be nice. But there are so many young liberals who sit here and say, the corporate press told me that these people are bad, and the machine state government has decreed it by pen. So I don't care what crime they committed. I don't care what the jury said. I don't care who was on the jury. Enrique Tarrio, who was not there, should be in prison for 2 decades. Tell me this now. Why is Enrique Tarrio in prison?
Yeah, so they uncovered with him his plot to overthrow the government.
Enrique Tarrio's?
Yeah, and his organization.
What plot? Who's they? Give me some
prosecutors.
Give me some fucking data. Stop squinting at me and saying the prosecutors did a thing.
Luke's squinting because Tim's losing his mind. He's coming at this with this indignant, how dare you come in here and say things? Why won't you do dictionary and define every term I give you? Why won't you just tell me I'm right, Luke? This is so triggering to Tim.
No, you didn't read it. You didn't read the court papers. All you know is the fascist machine state told you he should be in prison, and you're saying yes to them. Tell me why.
No, I understand that laws on the books have been there for a long time that I agree with, that if it's proven that you had a plan and you wanted to act on it, then days after.
What's the proof?
The proof is
say the proof.
By prosecutors.
Say it.
Communications.
You know, the problem with everything that is being levied here is you could just as easily turn this around on Tim and say, okay, so it sounds like you're essentially saying you don't respect the way that the laws are written. You don't respect the conclusions of a jury within a trial. You're just saying none of it really matters. And so we could turn that around and say, okay, so listen, Kyle Rittenhouse's acquittal, I don't agree with the way that the self-defense law is written. I don't agree with the conclusions of the jury. I think the system was biased in his favor. This is sort of the conspiracy loophole or black hole I've talked about before, where evidence for and evidence against or absence of evidence, it all points to the same conclusion because you've predetermined it. And this is, of course, another one of those examples where despite the recorded audio tapes of Enrique Tarrio, the Proud Boy leader, despite prosecutors proving their case, despite everything that happened, Tim just doesn't agree with it. And so the thing that if I were to critique Luke here, I would say he should have more quickly recognized it doesn't matter what he says. It almost, in the 2.5 hours, it almost doesn't matter what Luke says, because what this is really about, it seems to me, is that Tim really didn't like that 20 whatever year old Luke Beasley came in and faced down 5 of these people, and all they could do was blow up and yell at him. Let's look at a little bit more of this.
What communications? What did he say? What did he do?
Is this serious?
Are you going to tell me why you think Enrique Tarrio should be in prison for 20 years, or are you going to say the government decreed it?
I just explained to you.
So the government said so. Is that it?
It's usually law enforcement, which I guess is part of the government.
Government said so?
Yep.
Law enforcement
that uncovers evidence of communications, a memo that he
It's sort of like, how does law enforcement work, Tim?
crafted and sent to his organization,
saying what?
That detailed each institution of government that they were going to try to overthrow. Then just days later, his organization is at the Capitol.
Typing.
I don't think we can even pull up Enrique Tarrio.
I'm not quite.
All right, so then about a minute goes by, and then it's maybe like the absolute funniest moment where Luke is immediately proven right, and it makes Tim Pool's entire blow-up seem really stupid.
States that is true. Well, now we got a problem. Let's try this again. Let's try a secondary source. Let's see.
Sorry, let me back up because we actually missed it. Tim looks it up, and it's exactly what Luke said.
In the article. So here's a citation. Proud Boy and 3 other members of the far-right groups were convicted Thursday in a plot to attack the Capitol. A jury in Washington, D.C. found Tarrio and 3 lieutenants guilty of seditious conspiracy after hearing dozens of witnesses. Jurors cleared a 5th defendant, Dominic Pizzola, an assistant in charge, and a significant milestone of the Justice Department, which is now secured a conspiracy, blah, blah, blah.
Uh-oh, it's exactly what Luke said.
They will never stop. Okay, that's interesting. Wikipedia asserts that they did this, but there's actually nothing in the news article that actually states that is true. Well, now we got a problem. Let's try this again. Let's try a secondary source. Let's see. There it is. They introduced evidence that Tarrio discussed with associates a plan to have a large crowd in Washington storm government buildings in a scheme they called 1776 Returns, in which the Winter Palace was used as an apparent code for the U.S. Capitol. In a message, he said, make no mistake, we did this, do what must be done, and he directed the Proud Boys to do it again. So the question then becomes, in the bigger picture...
So are you going to at all acknowledge that you just blew up over something that I was absolutely citing fairly?
I don't think you cited it fairly.
I think people should be prosecuted for engaging in plans to overthrow a government. That's kind of...
That's a very loose definition of plans to overthrow the government.
Now the terms are too loose, and it's all... Listen, this is really a masterclass from Luke put in a very difficult position. I'm not going to play this entire thing, but here's another moment where the topic of the deficit came up, and this is really good.
So security...
You're not hearing me.
The large spike was COVID. I actually don't know if Trump's debt was in any way more egregious than any of the past presidents. It looks rather linear.
Yeah, I just think if you... Again, since this portrays it in a different visual, Axios, Trump, Biden debt, should pull it up. Trump does have, he added more to the debt than any president. But again,
this one says he ran up twice
COVID to be
the
specific.
debt.
I don't know about
Right. That's COVID.
No, exclude. Look, non-COVID.
Oh, I see. You're right. Yeah, non-COVID relief. Trump is more than double Biden. I see Trump's position, and I don't.
Quickly, get that off the screen.
Credit for this one is that you want to be under-leveraged. His idea is that you want to maintain growth above spending, and then it doesn't matter if you're.
But he failed to do that even before COVID. I think we agree.
I don't know. I mean, the economy was doing fairly well, regardless.
But if you look at the
now he's changing that. This is a classic. Now he changes the topic. Now, Tim, from going from the debt and deficit issue, once that was proven wrong by Luke, Tim just goes, the economy kind of seemed to be doing fine, which is a different argument. That's a modern monetary theory argument, which is even despite deficit spending, if it's on the right stuff, the country and the economy could be doing fine, which I think is an important topic to engage with, but it's one they deny until Luke Beasley shoves it in their face. Really nice job by Luke here. And 2.5 hours, exhausting to deal with these people, but very nicely done. All right, January 1, 2025, we are going to be doing a one-day membership discount special. It will be a discount the likes of which no one has ever even heard of before. If you'd like to take advantage of this one-day membership discount, get on our mailing list at davidpakman.com. Upper right of the website, you'll see where you can put in your email address. Get on our mailing list. On January 1, you'll get an email telling you how to take advantage of this great membership discount. And number 2, we have the rare, occasional open position on the program, okay? I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. If you're interested in applying, I'll give you the instructions in a second. Not following the instructions would instantly disqualify you. We have a full-time, fully remote position opening on the show. This is going to be a blended position, which will include editing and tech stuff, social media stuff, guest booking, and also booking me on other shows, being backup producer to producer Pat, and a bunch of other marketing and other tasks. If you are interested in this, the first step would be to email info@davidpakman.com with the subject open position. Any other subject would get you disqualified, okay? Attach your resume, don't paste it, attach the resume, and include a short note about why you feel you would be a good fit for this position. If you aren't sure what those 3 requirements are, just rewind this 30 seconds, okay? Info@davidpakman.com is the email. And then we will respond. If you have followed the instructions, we will respond with a more formal position description. All right, we will take a quick break. When you are seriously hurt, your injury could be worth a lot of money. Our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, does not settle for lowball offers. They let you find out how much your case could be worth online in just a couple of minutes. In the past couple of months alone, Morgan & Morgan saw verdicts of $12 million in Florida. That's 34 times the highest insurance offer they had gotten. $26 million in Philadelphia, 40 times the highest insurance offer. $6.8 million in New York, 25 times the highest insurance offer. Their fee is absolutely free unless you win. Personal injury lawsuits serve a crucial role. When you suffer an injury that someone else caused, you could be left with huge medical bills, lost wages, other expenses that simply should not be your responsibility. The change to your life could range from a mere inconvenience to something you aren't even sure you can crawl out from. Either way, that is why personal injury lawsuits exist. You, the plaintiff, can hold the negligent party accountable, get the compensation you deserve and need. Did you know you can start a claim with America's largest injury law firm in just a click? It is so easy. You can start your claim now with Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com/Pakman or click the link in the description. The David Pakman Show, of course, will continue into 2025 to be funded primarily by members of our audience. You can sign up at joinpakman.com. You can use the coupon code NOTAGAIN. And if you'd rather wait a few days, on January 1st, we'll be doing a one-day membership special, which you can be notified about if you get on our newsletter at davidpakman.com. On Christmas, Donald Trump did a few things, including exploding in an uncontrollable manic post spree where he went after former President Barack Obama and, generally speaking, lost his mind. Now, this is of particular interest to us right now for a couple of different reasons. One, it's that as Donald Trump is mostly posting and playing music, DJing at Mar-a-Lago, it seems as though Elon Musk is increasingly becoming a negotiator and a node of power and information for this incoming administration. It's also relevant because as the world is watching and waiting to see what sort of absurdity and pathetic presence Donald Trump brings back to the Oval Office, when Trump is posting dozens of unhinged screeds and conspiracy theories to Truth Central on Christmas, it once again starts to push the United States back towards being the laughingstock of the world that we were during Donald Trump's first term. I'll just scroll through this. I want to dig into the Christmas message in a moment, but just to give you a sense, endless screenshotted posts, videos where Donald Trump reposted old Christmas messages, memes and animated images, talking about how he was just hanging out with former hockey player Wayne Gretzky, who should run for Prime Minister of Canada, soon to be Governor of Canada. Then Trump put out his Christmas message, which I want to get back to, so I'll skip that for now. Reposting messages from others. Trump holding another one of these made-up awards, looking burnt umber, as is often the case. Other memes, and this is just within a few hours, it's important to mention. Threats about taking over the Panama Canal, Christmas cards and other memes, messages and articles from right-wing leaning websites like Fox News and the Daily Signal, Wall Street Journal opinion pieces saying Kash Patel should become the director of the FBI. In fact, article after article about that, talking about how Pete Hegseth should absolutely become Secretary of Defense, talking about reposting attack articles against President Joe Biden, posting a sort of Christmas card type message of he and Melania. And it just goes on and on and on. And this is all Christmas Day, folks. I'm still scrolling dozens and dozens of posts, articles from conspiracy site The Gateway Pundit, from Newsmax, from Red State, from the New York Post. It keeps going and going, reposting Elon Musk. And he continues announcing a couple of nominations, and it continues. This is all Christmas Day, all Christmas Day. Reposting messages from Roger Stone, reposting lurid articles from the New York Post, and then finally getting back to 2 days ago. This is not normal. This is not the behavior of a stable individual who is going to rationally discharge the duty of the President of the United States. You know, I recently read an article, a book rather, want to make sure I get the name right. The book is called Nuclear War, or Nuclear, as some like to say. Nuclear War by Annie Jacobson. The book is essentially the arc of what would happen if we were to engage in a nuclear war globally. And the book, as I read it, as I saw it outline, the calm and rationality that such a scenario would require of an American president. I couldn't help, even though the book doesn't mention Trump. The book's not about Trump. It's a hypothetical nuclear war scenario. What does the president do? What does the chairman of the Joint Chiefs do? What does the SecDef do? All I could think of is, in a month, the people that would be in the positions to make these decisions, if this scenario were to come to fruition, would be Trump and J.D. Vance and Pete Hegseth, among others. And that is utterly terrifying. And as you scroll Trump's Truth Central and see him selling guitars and all sorts of nonsense, that terror is only reinforced. Let's now get to the Christmas message. Ah, yes, the Christmas message from Donald Trump, an annual tradition where festive cheer and goodwill are nowhere to be found. This year's message manages to blend international diplomatic incompetence with revisionist history, bizarre insults, and campaign rhetoric when there is no campaign, in what I can really only describe as a stream of consciousness fever dream. Take a look at Donald Trump's Christmas message. Quote, "Merry Christmas to all, including to the wonderful soldiers of China who were lovingly but illegally operating the Panama Canal, where we lost 38,000 people in its building 110 years ago, always making certain that the United States puts billions of dollars in repair money, but will have absolutely nothing to say about anything. Also, to Governor Justin Trudeau of Canada, whose citizens' taxes are far too high, but if Canada was to become our 51st state, their taxes would be cut by more than 60%, their businesses would immediately double in size, and they would be militarily protected like no other country anywhere in the world. Likewise, to the people of Greenland, which is needed by the United States for national security purposes and who wants the U.S. to be there, and we will." Now, this is part one. This is all classic Trump, a mix of fact, fiction, and confusion. The idea that soldiers from China are running the Panama Canal is totally false. The canal is operated by the Panama Canal Authority. It's a Panamanian government agency. The kernel of truth is that there are Chinese companies that have investments in Panama, in the same way that there are Chinese companies that have investments in the United States. That is not Chinese soldiers running the canal. Now, Trump references now 38,000 deaths that took place in the construction of the canal. It's completely irrelevant and inaccurate. It appears as though the number is 25,000 people. 25,000 people really did die around the construction of the Panama Canal, not 38,000. They mostly died from disease that at that point in time, humans had not figured out how to deal with. It's that simple. It has nothing to do with anything about the building or the building quality or any of it. And of course, the cherry on top is the US pays billions but gets nothing. This is Trump's go-to. America is paying and we're not getting what we deserve. We are being exploited globally. And then, of course, Trump's obsession with Greenland comes up again, the sequel to his previous proposal to buy it. And it's neither here nor there. Now, here's part 2 of Trump's Christmas message. Page 2. Merry Christmas to the radical left lunatics who are constantly trying to obstruct our court system and our elections, and are always going after the great citizens and patriots of the United States, but in particular, their political opponent, me. They know that their only chance of survival is getting pardons from a man who has absolutely no idea what he is doing. Also, to the 37 most violent criminals who killed, raped, and plundered like virtually no one before them, but were just given incredibly a pardon by sleepy Joe Biden. I refuse to wish Merry Christmas to those lucky souls, but instead will say go to hell. We had the greatest election in the history of our country. A bright light is now shining over the USA, and in 26 days, we will make America great again. Merry Christmas. Now, of course, you all know, if you watched the show earlier this week, Biden didn't pardon violent criminals on death row. He commuted their sentences to life without the possibility of parole. This is because Joe Biden, as am I, is fundamentally opposed to the death penalty at a structural, conceptual level. He didn't pardon those people. He commuted their death sentences. Trump's Christmas message, as always, not about Christmas. It's about Trump. It's an unfiltered stream of grievance politics, revisionist history, and propaganda wrapped up as a Merry Christmas. This is what we can expect for 4 years to come. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com, joinpakman.com. It's great to welcome back to the program today Henry Giroux, who is the chaired professor for scholarship in the public interest at McMaster University. Henry, it's so great to have you back on, although I guess I should say, unfortunately, under these circumstances, in some sense. I think maybe to start with, one of the conversations I've been having with folks in the sort of political space, the overtly political space, about authoritarianism, and sometimes people talk about fascism, et cetera, as concerns with this incoming administration, is that a lot of people come to me and say, you know, yes, a lot of the rhetoric certainly was extraordinarily authoritarian and fascistic from Donald Trump during the presidential campaign, but we question his real interest or ability to implement to some degree some of these bad ideas, and therefore it's not as concerning to me. What do you think about any aspect of that as an argument?
I think it's a form of diversion. I think that we need to take what Trump says very seriously, especially in light of the changing nature of the administration. He has surrounded himself with a bunch of ideological ghouls who, it seems, Stephen Miller in particular, who it seems to me are very dangerous and are very focused. And I think unlike the first presidency, he's quite serious about what he wants to do. I mean, when he talks about immediately deporting up to 20 million immigrants, or he talks about shutting down the Department of Education, or he consistently echoes sentiments around white supremacy and Christian fundamentalism. I think we need to be alert to the language. Language matters. And I think that people who don't take language seriously often find themselves in a space in which self-delusion turns into a form of self-sabotage.
What do you make of, or let me put it a different way, is it fair to make an assessment or come to a conclusion about the American people on the basis that he was able to get himself elected? In other words, is there a fair assessment to be made of the voters based on Trump's success on November 5th?
I think the real question here is, what is the role of culture in basically either enabling or disempowering people? What are the institutions that basically undermine an individual's perception of himself and or herself in a society that is basically increasingly marked by inequality, white supremacy, a number of the assaults on the planet? What is it that limits the ability of people to basically be insightful, to be critical, to be informed citizens? Democracy doesn't exist without informed citizens. So I don't want to blame people or blame the populace. I want to ask myself the question, what happens in a democracy when the truth basically is sublimated or substituted for ignorance, when reason collapses? And what are the institutions responsible for that? And what are the conditions that are being overlooked that basically mobilize people towards the appeal of a strong man? That's a pedagogical question. It's not just a political question. And I think the pedagogical question is enormously missing, it seems to me, from these debates about Trump, about fascism, about a whole range of issues that really speak to the emergence of a very dark moment in our history.
There are some who say, yes, I am concerned in the way that you were outlining about Trump, but I felt that the dishonesty came from being told the economy was good when it really didn't seem good to me, being told that I didn't need to worry about immigration or crime by Kamala Harris, and I believed I did need to worry about that, right? I mean, my point is, there's a movement that would agree with the principles you're giving us, but would argue they felt the darkness and deception came from the Democratic candidate and the current president. What do we say to folks who make that claim?
No, I think it's a terrific point. And I think that I want to make clear that when I talk about Trump and I talk about fascism, I'm not just talking about Trump the individual. I'm talking about two parties, one of which is much worse. But in some ways, the Democratic Party simply failed to address the issues that most working class people live out every day. There's a language in both instances that it seems to me disassociates themselves from a language in which people can recognize themselves and recognize the problems that they're facing. And to say that Trump and Trumpism just took advantage of that. But the Democrats, I mean, from Clinton on, have almost nothing to say to working class people in ways that would suggest that the future that they're being written out of the script of democracy. They're being written out of the script of prosperity. They're being written out of the script of social mobility. These are the issues that people want to know where they're getting food from. They want to know why they have to make a choice between medicine and it seems to me healthcare or food or putting their kids to school. So no, I think the issues of everyday life were simply not addressed by the Democratic Party. That's for sure.
Is there some sense?
I don't believe the solution is by saying that. I don't think the solution is Trump. Right. I think that's a mistake.
Yeah, well, that was going to be sort of where I wanted to go with this, which was, it seems that if we're honest, even though the solutions proposed by Trump were sometimes barely even qualifying as solutions, and sometimes they really wouldn't fix the problems, on some level, it does seem like some voters saw Trump's rhetoric as more genuine than the sort of Kamala Harris, same speech 3 times a day, tax deduction for small business owners, and this stuff that, like, I don't know. There seemed to be something that, even though Trump seems to me completely disingenuous in the sense of he'll say anything if he thinks it'll help him get elected, regardless of his personal belief or ability to implement it. But for some people, it seemed genuine based on what I'm hearing from them. Is that possible?
No, I think that's possible. Where I have trouble with that argument is that it doesn't go far enough. I mean, at one level, there's the argument that there are basic democratic, economic, political, and personal needs that characterize a democracy that need to be addressed. At another level, there are people, and particularly authoritarians, who will make an appeal to those concerns, but in a sense, want nothing to do with them. And they actually do see them as a threat. I mean, Trump is not going to, in some way, address questions of inequality. That's for sure. At another level, the Democrats, who basically have aligned themselves with Wall Street in ways that are unmentionable and have ignored the war in Gaza. It seems to me they've been enormously disingenuous and out of touch. And I think in both instances, what we're talking about is not that Trump had something to say that mattered or the Democrats ignored it. David, we need a third party in this country. You need a third party. You need a party about democracy, not a party about oligarchy, or not a party about simply in some way reinforcing the interests of Wall Street bankers. And that argument has been ignored, except for some. It's a marginal argument.
There are a couple of specific policies that I'm curious to get your thoughts about in one specific sense, which is, how would the general public react? And the answer may be, it depends which part of the general public. We'll see. But the couple things I'm thinking of that have been bandied about are these militarized mass deportations, which would necessitate the construction of some kinds of facilities. Some are calling them camps, detention centers, whatever. That's one policy. The other is the potential targeting criminally of journalists and political opponents for obvious reasons of retribution or revenge. Whether he could get away with it in terms of whether he can hire the people that will do it or not, you can weigh in on that. But really what I'm interested in is, do you have a sense of how the American and global people would react to such policies?
I think the first question for me is, the answer to that lies in the fact that Trump and his core and his allies are certainly concerned about that, and that's why they ban books. That's why they destroy any sense of history that matters. Because the last thing that they want to see when the trains go running through these towns with immigrants packed in them, there are certain memories there that correlate with something in the past that speaks of something horrendous. And that's true for journalists. Remember, the first sign of authoritarianism is to eliminate the critics that basically hold it accountable. And I think that as bad as the legacy press can be, those assaults will be so visible, so obvious, so horrendous, David, so at odds with even the weakest notion of what a democracy is about. I think there's going to be an enormous pushback around these issues.
So it sounds, if I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like you're saying that would be a bridge too far for too many people for them to get away with that.
I believe that, yes, I do. I think it'll be a bridge too far. And I think the third bridge will come with the tariffs. And all of a sudden, people find themselves actually in a worse condition economically than they had been in the past.
One of the things that seems to have been prevalent in American politics, let's say at least for the last 20 years, is that often when bad things happen, the blame is placed along partisan lines. I'll give you a couple of examples. When Obamacare included the state Medicaid expansion, and a bunch of red states opted not to do it, it was the decision of Republican governors. You did have voters who said, Obama didn't give me my health care. And of course, Obama offered the expansion. Some states didn't do it. It was the governor's fault why they didn't have health care, not Obama. But if you wanted to see Obama as the villain, you saw Obama as the villain. You can probably see where I'm going with this, which is some of these tariffs will certainly make products more expensive. A lot of the economic policy that Trump has outlined would make life more expensive for Americans. I have this idea the right people will be blamed, but I'm not confident based on history that that's the case.
Look, I mean, we're in a period when we're engaging in a massive historical struggle, it seems to me, over democracy and the institutions that support it. And I think when you disengage that kind of question from a crisis of consciousness, a crisis of morality, and a crisis of education, and a crisis of critical thought, and a crisis of truth itself, we get into a space in which we say, can we blame how are we going to figure out how the red states are lying about Obamacare, right? What we really need to ask is, what is it that's happened in the culture that makes ignorance so profound that it becomes difficult for people to address questions like this and make the obvious obvious? And that is, this is not just about healthcare. It's about an attack on the public good. It's an attack on education. It's an attack on the critical functions of agency. It's an attack on collective struggle. These are the issues. The other stuff is just simply, it's detritus. I mean, it's a consequence of those problems. But we tend not to get to the source of the problem itself. People should be able to immediately recognize that when in the red states, governors say, no, we're not going to accept federal aid for healthcare. Hello? I mean, that's not exactly a profoundly complex issue, is it? What's complex is the culture of ignorance that mobilizes that possibility for not being able to see through what's going on politically. We don't know how to hold power accountable anymore because the institutions that are supposed to do it are under enormous attack, whether it's your program, whether it's the media, or whether it's education. These are all pedagogical institutions. These are all institutions that operate off the assumption the truth matters, history matters, politics matters, and collective struggle and critical thinking matter. And they're being destroyed precisely for those reasons.
I want to ask you a little bit about, for those who are motivated to resist or oppose. Mark Elias had an interesting article saying the resistance of the first Trump term is not going to cut it. There needs to be sort of a more durable opposition of sorts. And I think he makes the case that this is more than just a semantic distinction. He kind of lays it out. What does history tell us about in these cultural moments? What are the effective ways to robustly oppose what may be coming?
I think the first thing is to make power visible and to make the problems that we face visible. They need to be visible. They need to be put into a comprehensive narrative in which people can recognize themselves. We need a language that is some way contextual, that touches people's lives. I mean, the left has failed on this. We need to get away from the abstractions, and we need to talk about issues in which people can say, that's me. I understand that. And not only understand it, recognize that they need to go further in some way to address those problems. Thirdly, we need a comprehensive understanding of the problems that we face. We need to be able to translate, David, personal issues into larger systemic issues. Not to do that is to privatize everything, including the assumption that all social problems are problems of character, are problems of individual morality. That is the most depoliticizing moment, it seems to me, in neoliberal ideology. It's worse than medieval ideology. I mean, it just makes people powerless. Lastly, we need a unified party. We need to bring these groups together under a comprehensive narrative that really showcases one particular term: radical democracy. Democracy, what is it? You can't be a racist and believe in democracy. You can't believe in inequality in a country run by oligarchs if you believe in democracy. And we need to bring those moments together in which people can work together for that larger narrative outside of the individual narratives that are often driving an oppositional politics.
We have been speaking with Henry Giroux, chaired professor for scholarship in the public interest at McMaster University. Always a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much for your time.
Okay, David. Thank you for having me.
If you value what we do at The David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind the scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial-free daily show. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show.
Well, they effed around and now they are very quickly finding out. I have been talking to you now for several weeks about the various constituencies that confidently and proudly and defiantly and courageously, as they saw it, endorsed Donald J. Trump for president of the United States, as well as many Republicans, despite the fact that Republicans have shown an antipathy to all organized labor, to all unions. And that includes, yes, even first responder unions like firefighters and police and others. And we now have video, Christmas video, of New York City firefighter unions that supported Trump and supported Republicans who are furious that the House is deciding to strip funding for the 9/11 healthcare program. This shouldn't be news to them. Jon Stewart has talked about this and covered this for years. Despite claiming that they support first responders and back the blue and blah, 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 you know all of it. Time and time again, we find Republicans wherever we look who say, I don't know, it's been a while since 9/11. It's time to cut some of this funding. Take a listen to this.
We're calling on the administration that's coming in. We're calling on the senators and congresspeople that have made their promises to honor what everyone has said, to never forget.
New York City Fire Department unions are calling for the restoration of funding to the James Zadroga 9/11 Health and Compensation Act after it was left out of Congress's funding on Friday. The act guarantees medical treatment for first responders, firefighters, and survivors who helped with the recovery efforts following the World Trade Center attack. It also provides financial compensation for those who suffered injuries, illnesses, or death as a result.
There you have it. They effed around and they found out. And what is the underlying principle here? The underlying principle is a reminder that they have no principles. The underlying principle is a reminder that the principle of supporting first responders applies when it is convenient. The principle of keeping the debt low, the deficit low rather, is relevant when there is no politically expedient alternative that includes raising the deficit. For example, if Donald Trump wants to cut taxes for the rich, all of a sudden that becomes the priority rather than keeping the deficit low. And so they have found it out. They found out, and now they are going to have to deal with at least 2 years, right? We don't know what will happen in 2026, but at least 2 years of a president who is willing to do whatever he believes will be most convenient and flattering to him, a Republican Party that supports first responders except when they don't, except when it comes to a lot of these 9/11 medical bills, or when it came to the January 6th riots, or when it came to the FBI and intelligence agencies when what they were concluding was not convenient to Donald Trump. The principle at play that they are very quickly finding out about is that none of their stated principles matter if they are inconvenient. If you've been watching this show, you already know that I've been saying for months that the Trump economic agenda is a disaster waiting to happen. It can't work as promised, so it either fails or Trump abandons it. Well, now, even CNBC is starting to catch up. CNBC had an article this morning laying out exactly how Donald Trump's big promises are going to run headfirst into reality. I want to break this down piece by piece because every economic promise Trump made is poised to backfire in spectacular fashion. Ending the war in Ukraine before taking office. Trump said that it was after winning the election, not after being inaugurated. After winning the election, he would have the Russia-Ukraine war solved. He said it to his base. And of course, now he's saying it's a tough one. He's hedging his bets. The confidence is gone. Imagine campaigning on the idea that you can single-handedly end a war without any plan, only to realize that it's a little bit complicated once you win. The markets and global stability don't run on Trump's slogans. And even Trump's own comments show he's totally unprepared for the real world fallout of this. blanket tariffs on the world, China, Mexico, Canada. Trump's promise for tariffs on everyone sounds very tough. And then you remember what happened last time. Countries like China retaliated. They cut off U.S. agriculture imports. They left farmers in a bind. And now world leaders and policymakers in D.C. are having to scramble to figure out, how do we prevent Trump from doing the blanket tariffs? Because they know it would be terrible for the economy. It would drive prices up for consumers, and it would be a disaster. Tariffs maybe make a great soundbite. Strong man. Oh, what an alpha. Very tough. They don't pay off when the retaliation costs more than the revenue they bring in. The largest tax cuts in American history. Trump's plan, I guess you could say, is one for the ages. It'll age badly, but it's one for the ages. Trump wants, again, massive individual and corporate tax cuts, promising they will stimulate so much growth that they will pay for themselves. If it sounds familiar, it's because we saw the movie before. I read part 1 of this book, and we have a spoiler, which is it ends with ballooning deficits, just like it did in Trump's first term. Independent estimates say it'll cost about $9 trillion over the next decade. And with a $36 trillion national debt, there are even Republicans saying, we're not so sure about this. Trump said he would pay down the debt with the tariffs and with oil. You might be laughing because it's laughable. Trump says tariffs and expanded oil drilling will reduce the debt. The U.S. is already the largest producer of oil in the world, and prices are expected to stay low. That's not a recipe for using oil to pay off the debt. The oil companies are not going to flood the market because Trump is asking them to do it. Not only that, but basic economics prevents it. And then the tariffs, history shows us that tariffs do not work to bring in the sort of money Trump is talking about, especially when countries retaliate. Rebecca Babin is a senior energy expert, and she said, quote, if energy prices are halved, remember, Trump said he would cut energy by 50%, prices by 50%. She said something is terribly wrong. And as I've explained before, if somehow energy prices declined by 50%, it would be an economically disastrous deflationary spiral, the likes of which I don't know that we've ever seen. And then finally, you have the reality that Trump would have to ignore the national debt to do all of this. That's the elephant in the room. Servicing the debt itself will become an even bigger strain, and Trump's agenda completely ignores that. So the effect is that even some Republicans in Congress are starting to rebel. We saw that during the debt limit fight. Trump says, I've got all the answers. I know everything. I'm going to do it all. Even his party doesn't trust him. Forget about the Democrats. His party doesn't trust him. So Trump's promises, as usual, they sound very bold. They fall apart the second they meet reality. The Ukraine rhetoric, total bluster. The tariff plan, proven failure. The tax cuts, just going to lead to more of a deficit. The real irony here is that none of these are new problems. We've seen this playbook before. We have examples of all of these actions. And we can say, oh, it doesn't work. It always ends the exact same way. The average American pays more for bad policy. They pay more for products. They pay more for energy. They pay more sometimes in terms of sacrifice when it comes to the military, when presidents get us wrapped up in engagements we shouldn't be in. So Trump says it's all going to make us so prosperous. We're all bracing for the fallout. And if you've been watching this show, you already saw it coming. I want to remind you, we have an open, full-time, fully remote position on the show. These rarely come available. If you are interested, it is a production, editing, social media, and marketing role. Please write to info@davidpakman.com with the subject open position. Attach your resume and write a couple of paragraphs in the body. Hit the body of the email with a couple of paragraphs about why you think you'd be a good fit for the show. And we will follow up with candidates with a formal job description. And finally, remember that on January 1st, we'll be doing a one-day membership special to kick off 2025. If you'd like to be notified about that, just get on my newsletter, which you can sign up for at davidpakman.com. We've got a great bonus show for you today. We'll talk about the 50 bills that Joe Biden signed on Christmas Eve and so much more, including who gets to label a food healthy now. The FDA has a new definition. It's sort of what you would expect.
All of those stories and more on today's bonus show. I'll see you then. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. Our sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest personal injury law firm, lets you find out how much your case might be worth in just a couple of minutes on their app or website. You need a big law firm to fight a big company. Their fee is free unless you win, and you can start your claim with just one click at Morgan & Morgan at forthepeople.com/Pacman. The link is in the description.